Each for coming out this very different night. But the political said was very fitting to have a stormy, bleak, windy night for a night like tonight. And we're going to talk to you about bleak, windy, grim, and deathly, ghostly, horrible, wonderful things. Yeah. My name is Ryan. I run Lighthouse, and I have honestly devoured this novel. It's one of the most propulsive, strange, eerie novels I have had the delight of reading. It is described as an utterly beguiling feminist fiction that explores with such nuance and propulsive prose ideas of grief, memory, death, haunting, and ultimately how women's stories are told. And our author is Aliya Chaudhry, and I'm going to read her bio, and then you get to do the thing where you put your hands together and applaud her magnificence. Yeah. Aliya is a fiction writer and journalist. As a journalist, she has covered music and internet culture for publications including Alternative Press, The Daily Beast, Grang, MTV, NME, Slate. I'm not going to say this right. Stereogum, obviously. The Verge and Vice. She's lived in the UK, Pakistan, United States, and Kenya, and is currently based in London. Her short story, The Ghost of Creek Hill, an extract of what became Every Version Ends in Death, was previously published in Haunts Publishing May 22, 2022 anthology, When Other People Saw Us, They Saw the Dead. This is her first novel. Please join me in putting your hands together. It is real, this book, in full format. Today was the first time you heard it? The first time I've seen it. Ooh. It's longer than I thought it was, having read it in PDF. And I had the experience of sort of wolfing it down before there was a print copy, and it read like a short story, and then like a novella, and then suddenly I held the physical thing, and I was like, but how are there 200 pages? So I want to start, now that it is a physical thing, and it is sitting on bookshelves, in bookshops all over the world. Genre is an important part of it because it's described as a Gothic novel, ghost is horror as a genre, but it's also pitched as a feminist novel and also as an anti-ghost story. So which is it? What is this? What have you written?
Well, I think the last that's what I've been using recently. Not a good story. But yeah, it does deal with ghosts. I think it's kind of a ghost story for really connecting. And yeah, I think I think of it as like general literature. General literature. I think it is Gothic. It was inspired by like Gothic books. And got a lot of Gothic literature, which I read a lot of in university, but I don't read horror. So I feel kind of like calling out horror. But yeah, I think it was a tough one to sort of figure out like what
it is horrifying in places.
It's scary. I think it's terrifying. It's scary. It's not.
Yeah, well, I think you say at one point if they wanted to make a really truly terrifying movie, they would make a movie about regret. But how do you make regret like sexy and full of like, frustrations and energies that propel a novel? Did you have like a tension there of being like, I want to explore actually scary shit like lost memories and trauma and lost histories, all of that?
Yeah, I think I did definitely want to talk about. I think regret is like the worst emotion you can feel, and regret is the worst experience. And I kind of wanted to write like it's like the worst thing that makes it so terrible. Like, so I did really want to write about feelings of regret and guilt and letting people down. And like, yeah, stuff that's really scary and like scary in ways that like you like existentially scary as opposed to like jump scared.
It's a lot of the things that are frightening about the world crop up in very strange ways. I realize none of you will have read the book, so I completely jumped the gun. You might not know what it's actually about. So maybe we rewind. Will you give us the elevator pitch for the novel? What is it about? Who are the people?
So Lana Hashmi is 24 years old. She's back. She's gone back for the summer to her parents' house in Connecticut because her grandmother was just died, and during that time she gets really obsessed with the ghost story of Carolyn Hayward, which is like a ghost story that they have in their town. That every time she asks someone, she died in a different way. Like nobody can figure out how she died. Well, even like historical sources can't agree on like how old she was or like what year she died. And so she's kind of trying to figure out like why that happened, and she gets old friends that do a little bit of digging and ghost hunting, and other stuff.
That covers it. Within that, one of the things that made the novel read as Gothic to me as well was how place had its own character, both in the way of like how claustrophobic that small suburban town and its characters feel, but also the manor house. Can you sort of set the scene for us? Like, what was the landscape of the book? Can I also just check? Can everyone hear at the back? Okay, great. Just and if anyone online can't hear, just stick it in the chat, and then Peach can turn up the microphones. Okay. Sorry, the question was about landscape and place in the book.
Yeah. So I did want to write about like a small town. As you read in the bio, I'm in 4 different countries, and I have a professor one time. Writing professor tells me that like your stories don't have a strong sense of place. Because I guess because I was the person who didn't have a strong sense of place. So I think that was part of it, like just wanting to create a small town. I sit down and like map it out, like where big groups, because it's such a small town that like the town is mentioned in the book, and they're often going to the same places. So I didn't want to write about that. And I also wanted to write about that feeling of like you've known someone, grown up around people who've known you your whole life, and like they just keep reminding you of like things. Like I'm not 16 anymore. I don't do that. And also like if you have the same friends with very rare in my situation, like like what happens to the friendships if you.
Speaking of the characters, it's a pretty unlikable cast of characters. They're really horrible people. Tell me why.
I think I'm glad if you think that they're unlikable and you're not saying that I'm like condoning this behavior. I think I really like unlikable characters. I like reading about them. Like I think when I like them too much, I get like too invested, and then I start worrying with them. But yeah, so I like the unlikable. I think also I was also looking at their friendships and how like if to have gotten to that stage where you're like in your early to mid 20s and you're still friends with people you were friends with in your 13s, would have to forgive a lot of things. And you would have a lot of regrets, you have a lot of tension, a lot of like again, people down not being there for people.
Yeah, I think that it's in that way of like we're all kind of those people. We're all failing at being decent people in various ways, especially with like the people we've known the longest and we've had. I thought it was really fascinating the way you explored that. The other sort of big interplay is across generations, and it's the relationship that Lana has with her parents. Can you talk a little bit about how that was structured? Yeah, what was that story?
I think I wanted to write, but I feel like with a lot of like also education like South Asian characters, I feel like one type of parent will always get the sort of it's a very stereotypical, and like parents always come out terrible. So I wanted to write like a different kind of parent to that, and I wanted like turning into a parent, but not turning into them, and like that. And then also because and then, and like women doing things that like people think women shouldn't. So that was sort of how the mom's character came about.
I think it's interesting as well when you were talking about sort of reclaiming a space for, like within a genre, within in general, that we do stereotyping along ethnic lines, along racial lines, along gender over and over again. One of the things that sort of came out in the book was looking at the physical landscape in the cemetery, where one of the characters like you're not even here. Did you find that the story gave you the space to thread in problematizing the way that, no brown people in certain settings into suburban, typically white depiction, or the way that women historically would have done one thing and here was a woman who did something else? Were you conscious of using this book to explore those ideas and challenge your readers? Or is this just how you write and it was necessary to just do it that way?
I think it's probably somewhere in between the two, because that the thought of like I was walking in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, all these names are emphasized by name. And it's so weird for New York City, like like it was just so strange. I was like, how could they all be the same kind of person? In the city, it was filled with so many different people. So and I think there was that, and there was also like sort of like wanting to write a story that was like Asian story. So I wanted to write about something different, and then yeah, I think just like I just knew the way to talk about women, talk about their job. I've written about like a woman like Carolyn, the film. Forget that like people focus on the fact that what they do. And I was also thinking about how we talk about a lot of like writers who struggle with their mental health, and how much like with a lot of female authors don't focus on like really just focus on like their mental illness and like and apologizing and not so much on the work or like what else.
Speaking of creepy Carolyn, she's so pervasive through the novel. She is the haunting. Can you tell us who she was and how you went into creating all these breadcrumb trails, these fragments of her for the reading?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure where I was like trying to think about where I got this idea of like different versions. I think it had to do with studying Frankenstein in class, and it was every adaptation of Frankenstein's monster gets further and further from Mary Shelley's life. Like they just get like the monsters like it's completely different like what we think of Frankenstein monster in the book. And I was also thinking about Mary Shelley and how thinking about how I think of her and the fact that it's meant to be like invented science fiction and like now like sort of genre. And yeah, so with the ghost, I don't know exactly like I knew I wanted to like do a couple like different versions. And then I was sort of this like I mean the important thing to know about this book is I didn't know what I was doing the entire time I was writing it. You can't do yeah, so I was like maybe the story is moving along at some point. I was like, oh maybe she could just be a nurse. Like that was and then like years later I started writing this book in June 2019, I think. I realized that she was like sort of based on I got the idea from the Blackwell, who was the first woman to in the United States. And when I was younger, we lived in a city called Philadelphia Island, which is Blackwell Island, but it's not the same Blackwell, which I just found out. So yeah, I think a lot of things that characters go through in the book I went through like while I was writing it, like this idea of like trying to like figure out where you got like an idea from and then like you go to that person and will be like, I never said that. So a lot of that and like things and trying to and realizing you remember them incorrectly.
I want to loop back to some of the like really cool ways you actually did the writing. But before I do that, I wonder if you would give us a reading so people can have a flavor. Yeah.
Mother had been the first person to tell me the story. They were Vandersat at the hospital and the ice cream shop we would all go to after all required immunization. One day in kindergarten, sitting on the side of the creek after the doctor, I asked my mother about the old house. The story is that there was a nurse who lived there. There weren't any hospitals back then. What happened to her? I asked. Well, the problem is that with someone in the house, they get pregnant back then. Oh, that's so sad. It is. Not a lot of people though. That's why the house is still there. And now it's haunted by her. Some people think so. Some people think they her. I looked around the landscape. I never get to see her. Mom laughed. You want to see her? You're not scared? I said, she doesn't seem scared of me. But here, I heard a friend tell the story. Her house caught on fire. Yes. No, that's not true. I said, yes, it is, she said. Your house is still there. I said, it's not burnt. No, you can't see it. She was a nurse and got sick and died. So I'm pretty sure it was fire. Maybe she got sick and said there was a fire. A quick Google search. Hill house set for demolition. Historic house at the Creek Hill Road set for demolition at the end of the month. The house, also known as Hayward, belonged to the Hayward family, or the first family to settle the area. Charles and Annabelle were found the first office. Also, primary care. 1879, a fire killed Charles. Maryland has become inspiration. Article dated 2014. Common direct. Don't worry, Carolyn will keep it up.
Thank you for that reading. How many versions of her death are in the book?
Well, I didn't count that.
How many dates of when she dies?
And I don't have.
It's like, no, like it's a lot.
A lot of like I killed this poor woman like so many different times.
It's so morbid. She died. What?
She died like 12 different ways. I think I do list them all.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of ways. She dies a lot of ways at a lot of different times.
Yeah, and that's basically like content warning for the book.
Yeah, which actually brings me to that idea of foreshadowing of what you can give away or trust your readers with without giving away the plot in what is ostensibly a mystery. Can you tell us about like what content warnings you put in and why and how you navigated what you give away and what you couldn't?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I wanted to do with content warnings is that made some of the characters talk about death and the way people in general in real life talk about death. Like often very callous and cavalier and not very respectfully. I didn't want that to be like that's not how I think you should talk about death. And I think part of the big sort of theme of my book is like talking about death. Can you separate death from loss, and should we talk about death? Some people they can't separate death from grief. You don't want to be respectful to people, but like on the other hand, it's kind of weird that we all die one day and we never talk about it.
Yeah, you have a section where someone's like, what do you mean you've planned your funeral, but you haven't planned your wedding? And it's like, well, I might not have a wedding, but I'm definitely going to die. Not to get too deep, why the fascination with that? How did you come to write a book called Every Version That Didn't Die?
I think it like came from there's like a lot of like rock bands and there was a lot of like they would always be in the cemeteries and like in like sort of these shops and stuff like that. It was interesting because it was like sort of like planning death. But like yeah, it was like, and I think some of the characters will talk about like aesthetic of death, you know, sort of Gothic fiction. But yeah, it was very interesting. I also I think when you get, I've heard people talk about almost like the stage, right? If you get to where you start to like think about death, come to understand it, and as you get older, people go around that. And I think like the death of a grandparent is for a lot of people like sort of like their first sort of exposure to it.
I think you tread a really interesting line in the book, that one of like the way children will talk about death. And they are perhaps the most callous because it's clearly so abstract. And then as they get older and across different generations, what death becomes loaded with. There are a couple of things I want to pick up on from what you're saying. One is about music, and the other one is about funerals. Music. So you're a music writer, and you do something kind of weird and brilliant in the book where it feels like it has a soundtrack. There's so much music in it, but it's not precise. Like it's very abstract. There's all the CDs and records, but what is the music? What is actually playing? And can you talk about how and why you put music in the book?
Yeah, so because I'm a music journalist, I was thinking a lot about music when I was very, but I think I didn't want to. Yeah, I didn't want to like common thing, obviously. I think I really all the characters sort of like have their own various aspects of the part. I think that was important to me. They all have like
Characters is so rich, and every now, like the more I think about it, the more what did I think it was shorter than it was? That's a lot of it. The other question was about funerals, and this might be a glib one, but have you planned your funeral like your character did?
yeah, it's a very simple plan.
Do you want to tell us more about that?
I really want someone to reenact the music video for Helena by me. But I'm not gonna do. I mean, I'll do that. So that'd be really fun.
Okay, noted for anyone, including your parents. Like sure this out.
The quote about from the director for the like putting the fun back in funeral.
Um, just as a show of don't feel like it. Has anyone else planned the funeral? Oh, okay, we have still hands. We have some hits with them. Yeah, yeah. You will after you read this book. Yeah. That's makes it really it sounds like a lot of fun. Right. Yeah. I wanted oh, I have so many questions. I mostly questions that you probably also have questions. So have your thinking caps on in the room, and I'm going to ask you about those too. The I want to go back to the way you have a central character that does a huge amount of research, like becomes completely obsessed. And so throughout the book, you get snippets of where Carolyn has been recorded in history, whether that's a little bit of a medical journal or a little bit of a medical history or some history of the founding members of Connecticut. Where did you pull that sort of template of the way that women are remembered from?
So before I wrote this book in university, I was really into like writing, but like in writing different formats, like doing fiction, but like I wrote like a short multiple choice test and stuff like that. So I think that was like sort of like the remnants of that got writing book. nonfiction, like writing some of the like book extracts and like the creepypasta, and the newspaper articles. Like I think that was sort of like that was sort of coming in through there. And yeah, and I do a lot of research for my job, but also for fun. A lot of research. They're always fun.
She falls down a few rabbit holes. She really looks for the rabbit.
Yeah, I've never fallen down one for 2 months like she did.
Uh, Speaking of sort of morbid territory, going back to like clues, um, you philosophize quite well. Your character does a lot about um, death and dying and haunting and what it is to who and what are the ghosts that we live with every day. Whether that's I think it's sort of worn very lightly in some places where it will be like listening to a CD of a band where only one member is still alive, and so you're actually when you listen to the song, you're listening to different. And so I'm wondering how conscious you were about putting the ghosts in like all of those little breadcrumbs of ghosts, or whether or not those seep in, because you then also very directly write, philosophize, okay, about what it is to be haunted, what haunts us.
Yeah, I think with I was thinking a lot about how we talked about with dead writers and dead musicians. Way like dead records. And so I was thinking a lot about those things, like like being a woman and sort of like three spot and have yeah, I also think a lot about like crime goals and like how we talk about the victims. Yeah, I think that, like one of the things like that is
Just lift all those ghosts to the surface in a way. It's been slightly surreal going through my day and finding ghosts everywhere. Whether that's writers on myself doing a long term, or say that the women who haunt us that are the sort of cautionary tales, like Harlan, sort of, you know, he's made into this creepy story that is then told to frighten kids out of doing various things. But really, she's just a woman who did good things that didn't have babies.
just was doing her job.
Do we have any questions in the room? Yeah, we do. Oh, look, go for it.
So there's a little bit of social media again because I was messing with like different formats and stuff like that. I think it was the first thing I was very conscious of as a journalist where like I can't write a book where there's like there's no objective truth. Like we'll never know. But no, we can't do that. There has to be an answer. But yeah, I really did want to think about like, a lot of Gothic fiction. I just wanted to would be like text each other, like having blogs and like and being on like I guess Facebook or like not so much Facebook anymore. But yeah, and also I do very love it. Well, I mean, it's with writing fiction is like a little less I think pressure because you're a journalist and like telling someone else's story and I have like an objective that I need to explain to but like with this with fiction I'm not like beholden story. And then then I have a voice. I think to me, my characters have always felt very like a very strong sense of who they are, and like they felt like what they're for.
Yeah, it's a lot of dialogue in the book. It's going to be a sense of talking and what turn of phrase they're coming on. Just tacking onto that, are there particular writers either within the genre or beyond that like have informed the way that you write? I'm trying to bring that to your prose or trying to avoid like the play.
I don't know if there were specific writers in terms of style. I know like in terms of like the genre, there was a specific book that I was thinking about. Like, I think they're all mentioned in the book. I think like Northanger Abbey is like probably a good comparison because it's also about like two girls reading two ghost stories. And so thinking about Northanger Abbey and again like the traditional long spoken writing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think like with the, I mean, this doesn't fit into the whole like trend. I am on book talk. I don't post, but I'm like constantly attacked. But yeah, I think like that a lot of that is a reaction to like detective fighting the patriarchy and stuff like that. I think I think it's a combination of like writers now. I do think like Gothic is very and like sort of founded it. I just female Gothic. I think also this was not an influence on the book out came out while I was writing it. But there's the Church's album, Screen Violence, which had to do a lot about like being a woman, watching horror movies, like being a woman, always feeling you're being watched and always feeling about like it's like connection between the darkness. I think also it's something like unpleasant topic. Think about fun stuff like getting married and have kids. Think about dying.
So yeah, that rings so true and it's so interesting again in that moment and the why, but also just that really quietly subversive space that like the Gothic novel has of the way it subverts our ideas of the domestic and the way that women can exist in these spaces that are deeply uncomfortable in a way that maybe is not allowed so much in other spaces. Yours is described as a sort of, as a feminist novel. Do you consciously write as part of a feminist tradition, like you're building on the legacy of Frankenstein, or is it I don't know more general, more subtle?
I think I actually thought the feminism here was quite subtle, and when I was and so I was like, oh, I was worried that it wasn't going to come across. But yeah, I think I am a feminist. I think I'm happy to be in that person. Going forward, I think I'm thinking a lot more about like. I was worried that like I keep feeling this poor woman. Like I'm committing violence because women here with me. Over and over and over and over again. Worried about like falling into those traps, and I think some of the characters do fall into traps. That's a lot of were they getting enough? Yeah, relative.
Yeah, it's sort of violent in that death is violent and patriarchy is violent, but not in the sense of being gory. Like it's not. Do we have a question at the back? Go for it.
Are there any dead women that you'd like to be haunted by?
I don't know. It's a good. I don't know. It's a good question. It's also like I think this comes up in the book like as a person of color. Sometimes like I don't know like if I meant like She also would she be racist? um, yeah, I don't know. I think one of the things that comes with the book of it is like this idea of, like, I always thought it was like a nice idea that people were like haunted by the ghosts of their grandparents and people could like talk to them. Like it's not like it's over like or change they know or even like they're gone it's there for them now. Element again across generations that almost those pieces of past histories that are like photographs in a box where you're then looking at younger versions of your parents that look like you. You're almost haunting yourself. You get very meta. The more I think about it, so many layers. Such an onion of a book. Um, do we have another question in the room? I will. Well, you think there's one here, and just I'm going to caveat. I'm not being rude and looking at my phone and checking if there are online questions. I'm paying attention to you if you were online. But yeah, go for it. Yeah, I think I was a lot of the sort of stuff literature writing. It's not even like literature. I was like going with friends and work. A lot of it was like it was coming getting it and then there's like super diverse then tell that story. So I was like, I don't want to write. I don't know. I feel like I had a lot of stories about like cultural backgrounds. I feel like a lot of uh, but um, yeah, I did want to write like a story that was about not like this sounds like a parents culture, but and also one person with the center the belonging stuff. I think there are like smaller references to it, and I think that probably really it's the question from Joan, which is, how do you write a mystery if you don't know where the story's going? That's the fun part. Yeah, I have a mystery to me too. um, yeah, I think chapter 7.5, I think was the last part I wrote. So, get there, you will know. But yeah, I was, and it was, yeah, I think there was like, I wrote the whole thing and they had ordered it. And I have to go back and then I started reading the short story, and I just like, if I keep going, it'll be a novella. If I keep going, it'll be a novel. And then it got published as a short story. And when Boston did. And so it's funny that now there's two versions of the story in the world. And then it got published as a novel. And I think probably there, even within the excerpts that made into that story, there's probably some changes. But yeah, I think I mean, kind of think of the title of the story. There's so many different ways you can take your story and what you can do with the book. So I think like, but at some point you're like, well, if I add something really dramatic in this part of the book, it's longer fiction story, like it's sort of being one, like sort of like third or benefit the story. It's such a weird space to be in. The story is already out there, and your publisher published that story and then decided to publish this book. Well, it's good that she wanted more of it. I mean, it makes sense. I wanted more. I wanted more at the end of this book. Uh, I am also staggered that you wouldn't know how it ends because the tension is so real in digging to getting to the bottom of the mystery, but also getting like what feels so uncanny chapter after chapter. You just
in an offhand way, mention chapter 7.5. Because you did do that. As I could. What was the most fun you had in the story? Like, what was, where do you look into it and you're like, that was a neat thing?
That was one of those things where like I was like, so I was writing a lot of like reading a lot of experimental fiction. I think the fact that the book is written in a linear way, like I think there are a lot of parts that like sort of the styles were divergent. It was nice that like there were times where I was like it. And I think that was nice too that there could be these parts where like you know like you don't know if it's like someone so the mom just like talk to you or just, like what is she meditating like what's going on here. But yeah, I did have like a part where like I pulled apart all the like all the sections where I was like, okay, well, these are like excerpts from history books. This is dialogue between Lana and Sarah. This is dialogue between the three of them. And then like back in. So I had like sort of a, when I, as a later in the process, I had like a sort of a thermal shape, like I knew like stuff they're gonna have.
And was there anything that you felt you, especially within the context of writing about death, writing about trauma, writing about the many ways in which a young woman died in 1800? Like, was there anything that you just sort of felt like either it's hackneyed, it's been done, you're not doing it again, or that you didn't like, yeah, that either had to get left on the cutting room floor, or that you were like, no, this is an area of death and life and grief and pain that does not interest me as a writer. Just not going to do that. Not do that.
There were a lot of ideas that because that's like I write stuff about like I will talk about this, talk about that. Which again is like all the different go down. At some point you're like, well, this has to be a book. You can't just be like an endless writing through life.
That might show up in a short story at some other point in time. I don't know. I don't think so. Well, through we have anything. Yeah, there's one more at the back, and I'm going to do the same while I check my phone.
Thinking about the environment with your sense of place and the buildings, kind of like character, you approach creating that like with a character or in a setting. I'm just thinking like Shirley Jackson-esque kind of stuff, but how do you approach creating a setting or a place?
I think with like so with the house that we were talking with the Hero Manor, that was initially Blackwell House, but it was built the place that I and then I was like, it's just at that point, Blackwell House was very like very dilapidated house. Then I was like, we're gonna make this house like really cool, big. And so then I just like sort of like invented a really elaborate house, and then I kind of like made like certain people had access to it for the story. And this like I think once decided to this, I think I just got more creative with it. It turns out that they rebuilt Blackwell House during the pandemic, and now it looks more like it's in the book. What do you say? Short stories, now a ghost story, anti-ghost story. What? It's very different from this book. I'm doing a trilogy of heist novels about people who don't art repatriation heists. See it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. A trilogy. Okay. And I'm writing all three of them at the same time. I do not recommend my writing style, but it is working somehow. It's just complete chaos. Again, they're all good. Together again. But the good thing about like a heist book is like there's a pre-built structure, like there's existing structure.
So you know what happened at the end.
Yeah, I know what happened at the end of Walker.
Okay. Incredible.
I can spoil them all.
Do we have any final questions in the room? Yeah, one, two, we'll go one all the way to the back. Go for it.
Oh, it's another funeral question. What like top song to be played at your funeral?
Well, I guess I just said a moment. There was another song. I used to. Yeah, I'm not to think about the rest of them. Actually, that whole album, that's Three Cheers for Street Revenge is my favorite album. It's Death Purple. That is it's really hard. I think with this book, it's just like stuff pops into your head, especially like I mean a lot of this book is like Lana walking around like happen happens to everyone throughout the day. Um so there's a lot of that and like just coming up with ideas and I try to keep a list of things on my phone because the big problem from next book they come up with an idea like in the middle of the night or I have to go do something and I was like, no, I can't remember. Or yeah, so I do try to keep I've been writing everything in one document, which maybe is like probably not great because it's actually meditation. But there are sections I can find things in there. And I also keep a list of like so I keep a list on my phone of ideas like at the top of the document of like ideas for like what to do with this story. And then like especially with this book I had to keep a list of like things I know about the story, like how old is Carolyn actually die, what she has to die of, like what is actually what happens to some people, like a lot of true when she's not goes hunting. Um so yeah. And then the other thing is like I am often on deadline for journalism stuff. So yeah, a lot of it is like trying to figure out like what do I have time here to write stuff. I have not thankfully gotten a lot of very block and I have to I spent now an hour on this thing and I have deadline tomorrow.
Do we have a final burning question in the room? Yeah. Thank you all for coming up. Thank you for being here to celebrate a weird and wonderful novel. I want to thank Rebecca from Haunt and Haunt as a publisher, who I know that we do this as booksellers where we'll spot like the little logo on the front, you know, stuff. And a lot of readers don't do it. Always look for Haunt on the spine, because they consistently find, nurture, and help bring out like some really cool stuff. So shout out to Haunt. And now it leaves me only to ask you to join me in putting your hands together for Every Virgin Ends in Death and Aliya Chaudhry.